forward in the story a few hundred years or so. Did anybody read the chapter yet today? No, it's okay if you didn't. We're going to read it today. So let's jump into the story of Abraham. So it says, Genesis chapter 12, 1 through 4. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went as the Lord told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Harran. Man, what a crazy promise that is. Can you imagine if God came up to you and was like, I'm going to make from your kids, you're going to become a nation. Your name is going to be famous, and everybody's going to be blessed because of you. Like, wouldn't that just blow your mind? I know it would mine. I'm like, man, that is such a huge, huge promise. And I don't know about you, but I've definitely asked the Lord, like, God, what do you want? What is your plan for my life? What is your plan for me? And if you're not sure about this whole God thing, then maybe you've asked the question, like, what kind of legacy am I going to leave behind? What difference do I make in the world? Because no matter whether we believe in God or not, we have this deep need and to want to understand and be a part of something bigger than ourselves, something that's outside of ourselves and that actually makes a difference. And Abram just had all of those answers, all of those questions answered just then. He got the first one. His kids are going to be coming to a great nation. His name is going to be famous, and he's going to be a blessing. He just had all of that answered in one fell swoop. And I don't think in Abram's wildest dreams he could have ever imagined that happening. Now keep in mind, we're all pretty young right now. I'm going to lump myself in there. We're all pretty young. So we often are like, man, we can dream of all these big things in our future. But Abram, did you catch that? He's 75 years old. He's towards the end of his life, and God tells him this promise now. He's like, no, now I'm going to do it, Abram. I got you. And that's my first point is God's plans are always bigger than we could ever imagine. That's the first thing we can learn from this. God's plans are always bigger than we could ever imagine. Abram he was probably just living his life, doing his thing. He was a shepherd. He had a lot of cattle. He had a lot of servants and stuff. He was just doing his thing. But God says, no, now I'm going to do it. But he's like, all right, I'm going to take you up on that, God. I'm going to move everything to where you tell me to go. So he does. And he settles in that land. And a lot changes. But there's one hitch in this whole plan, is that Abram is 75 years old. And God just told him that his kids are going to become into a nation. But Abram doesn't have any kids at this point. He doesn't have any sons to take on his family name, to take on the generation. He doesn't have any kids in general. Him and his wife have not been able to conceive. And now he's 75. She's not much younger. They're past that age normally. So this is only going to be a God thing. But he's like, all right, God, you're telling me this. I'm going to move. We got this. And so he moves. And 9 years pass. And a lot changes for him. There's a lot of different things he goes through. But one thing doesn't change. He still doesn't have any kids. His wife still has not conceived. God still hasn't shown up with that side of the promise. And I think he starts getting a bit frustrated. Because after, he has this whole big victory, he has this conversation with God. Let's read it together. It says, after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, you have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. He's frustrated. And I love this about the Bible is that they don't just, it doesn't just sugarcoat humanity. It's not like the heroes of the Bible are all these just perfect people. No, They have real emotions and real things and real problems, and they make real bad choices sometimes. And Abram is frustrated. I mean, I would be too. Can you imagine if you had uprooted your entire life? God said to leave his family, his country, his nation, like probably his language, like the people that he moved entirely to a new place. He uprooted everything in his life to live in this other land, to follow what God told him to do. And it's been 9 years and nothing has happened. Like, he still doesn't have a kid to carry on his legacy, to get what God is promising him. I would be frustrated too. But the thing is that we often want the blessings of God, but we want it on our terms. We want the blessings of God on our own terms. Abram's like, no, I want the blessing, but you're not doing it in my time frame, God. I'm frustrated. And it's okay to be frustrated, and it's okay to tell God you're frustrated. He can handle it, but he's still like, it's not doing it. And the original sin, when we were talking about creation last week, the original sin was that we wanted to be God. We wanted to be God. We wanted to be in charge. We wanted things our way. We wanted to have control, and it has continued. We see it in Abram right here. He's like, no, like, you're not doing it on my time schedule. And we see it in ourselves even today. We want to have control. We want things to be on our terms. But we only get to see a glimpse. Abram has only seen a glimpse of the full promise. He doesn't see the full picture. He doesn't understand what God is doing. God is starting something. God is breaking ground on a building project that is going to take the next few thousand years and generations upon generations of people. Abram is only focusing right now on his little sphere and the promise that God gave him. He doesn't understand the full scope of what God is doing. The building project that God is starting takes literally the entire Bible to tell, and we are not even at the end of the story today, now. But Abram is seeing just a glimpse. He knows that God's going to make it his lineage into a nation and that everybody on earth is going to be blessed through him. But that's just a glimpse. He doesn't understand that God is building towards redeeming us and bringing us back into relationship with him through Jesus. Like, this is the first shovel scoop on the building project. Like, he is barely scratching the surface of that. But back to Abram, and he's frustrated with God. So God's like, all right, Abram, take a chill pill, head outside for a second, and look at the stars. Can you count them? No? Well, we can't count them. He's like, your descendants are going to be as numerous as the stars. And he reassures him of the promise. He's like, it's going to be okay. Like, keep trusting me. Keep trusting my timing. Keep trusting me. And Abram's like, okay. But as we often do as humans, we're like, okay, God, you said that I'm going to have a son, but did you say with who? Loophole. Let's see if we can work around this a little bit. So him and his wife are like, his wife's like, okay, Abram, like, maybe you can't have a kid with me, so why don't you have a kid with my servant, Hagar? And so he does. He has a son named Ishmael with his wife's servant. And then the drama explodes because now there's strife between his wife, Sarah, and the servant Hagar, and he's got a son now. But then 14 years later, his wife also gets pregnant with the son that he actually was promised from God. So now what? He's got 2 sons, one from the promise, one not, but he loves both sons. What is he supposed to do? There's a whole lot of drama about to go down. So let's read the story together. It's in Genesis 21, 8 through 21. It says, the child grew and was weaned. This is Isaac, the son of promise. And on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking. And she said to Abraham, get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. The matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. But God said to him, "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of your slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring." Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. There is so many things we can learn from Abram right now. So many things we can learn from this, because we are like this so many times. He has tried to go his own way and tried to do things his own way, tried to get the blessings on his own terms, and it's only led to hurt and pain and now separation from his son. So we can all, I'm sure we've all felt this way before. We're like, no, I know what's best for me. I know better than my teachers. I know better than my parents. I know better than God. I'm going to do my thing. But then we run into something that's like, oh no, that just caused way more pain and hurt to everyone around me than I ever thought was actually going to happen. I know I've had that in my life, and I'm sure you've had that at some point in your life. If you haven't yet, I'm sorry to say you probably will at some point, because we're human and we mess up sometimes. But God in his faithfulness is reassuring Abram. He says, Abram, don't worry about your son Ishmael. I'm going to take care of him. He also will become a nation because he's your son. Like, I will take care of him. Even though you went outside my plan and that's why this is happening, I'm still going to take care of him because God is that good and that faithful. But here's the thing that I always get a little hung up on every time I read this story. I'm always like, man, I feel like Ishmael got the short end of the straw. Like, why did he have to get sent away because of all of this? Like, what in the world, God? Like, why is that an okay thing? And that's when I have to remember something. And if you don't hear anything else I say today, I want you guys to remember this. God invites us to be part of his plan, but his plan is not all about us. His plan is not all about us. We get to be a part of it. Abram's promise, the promise that God gave Abram, if you remember back, he said he would be a great nation, great name, all these things. But the main thing, the last thing he says, and all the people on earth will be blessed through you. All the people on earth will be blessed through you. This promise was for Abram, but it wasn't just all about him. It was also about what God was doing in the big scope of things. I am so thankful that God did not let this mistake, this mess that Abram had made, stop him from what he was building towards. Because God was building towards Jesus dying for us so that we could be in relationship with God again. If this hiccup had stopped God from his ultimate plan, we would have no hope. We would be in the same mess that we always were, because we wouldn't have the hope of Jesus being like, you can now be in full relationship with God again. But God didn't let it stop him, and he doesn't let it stop him. God didn't want this for Ishmael. If you remember, if Abram had waited on God's timing, this pain would not have been happening. This thing would not have been happening to Ishmael, because he wouldn't have existed. But God is still faithful to take care of it as well as continue what he is building. He is still taking care of Ishmael and saying, I'm going to still make this Ishmael into a nation as well. I'm going to take care of him, Abram, don't worry. But I can't get distracted also from what we are building. So you need to focus also on Isaac, because we are building something so much better. So when I asked the question of God, what's your plan for my life? And then when I was reading this story this week, I was like, man, I think that's the wrong question. I think asking God, what is your plan for me, focuses it too much on myself. Because then I'm like, oh, what am I doing? What are you doing for me only? And I think a better question for us to ask is, God, how can I be a part of your plan? Or what part can I play in what you are doing? Because God's plan is the story, the big story of what he is doing. And our story is just a small bit of it. But we get to be a part of it, which is so cool that God lets us be a part of the story. So asking that question, God, how can I be a part of your plan? So I want to ask you guys a question. What is God asking you to give up to follow him? What is God asking you to give up to follow him? Is it your timing? Is it your plan? Is it what you think is best for your life? What is God asking you to give up to follow him? I know for myself that being up on this stage, guys, never would have dreamed it in a million years when I was your age. I was like, heck no, tech no. I wanted to go into nursing. But God had a different plan, and it is so much cooler. I get to hang out with you guys. So what is it that God is asking you to give up to follow him today? Let me pray for you guys. Hey, Jesus, thank you so much for what you did on the cross for us, Lord. Thank you for bringing us back into relationship with you. And thank you that you didn't let anything stop you from being in relationship with us again. God, I ask that you help us to be patient for waiting for your timing. I ask you to help us to have courage to step out in the things that you are calling us to do, even when we're scared, even when we're nervous, even when it makes us anxious. I ask that you give us courage and peace and guidance as you lead us into what your plans are for the world. God, thank you that we get to be a part of it. In Jesus' name, amen.